So somebody had left in the comments that they liked my little pin cushion. It's just a little log cabin, 2 little log cabins, and they're just sewn 3-sided one way, and then the last side folded in half the other way. So the block really ends here, but it's gone from the halfway point from each block. One thing that I do really like about this particular pin cushion is the tail. Came up with it myself and was just trying to be more of a cardinal tail instead of the usual, you know, square triangle tail that it goes with. But in the end, it's ended up being really, really helpful, because when I stick my pins in my pin cushions, or my needles in my pin cushions, I tend to lose them a lot. And finding them is not fun. So I've just started to sticking them at the end here, and it's actually been doing that. Well, Penny was 7 when, or my daughter was 7 when Penny was named, and she's 22 now. So I'm sorry, my brain is too tired tonight to do the math. So however old Penny is, it's just been a really good system that works with me. I've got my longer pin here for pulling my threads through the quilt. I really like those needles. So, yep. There's my little Penny. I've gone and I've drawn out the pattern, and it's done in the dark reds and light reds, and I've got the little tail there. One thing you're going to need to do is I've put it on the pattern, is please add all your seam allowances, because none of them are here. He finishes up at, I believe, 4 inches square. So it's a very small pin cushion, but as you can see, it works really, really well. So I've drawn the wording, the lettering, coloring, however you want to decide, in dark red and light red, but I'm actually going to do it in yellows because I don't want another red pin cushion. So I've got this stack of yellows left over, and I think it'll look really cute. It'll look like a canary, not a little canary. Finch, are those what they call? They have them in the nursing home here in town. Really sweet, sing very sweet. So it'll bring back a lot of memories, because that's the nursing home Mom was in, and it was the nursing home I worked in, and a long time ago, way before Mom was in there in the nursing home. So there's my pattern. I've just drawn on regular printing paper, but I have printed it up on the paper piecing tearaway paper that I like. This is the Carol Doak paper. There is the whiter one. I know some people prefer that, and if you prefer that, go ahead and print up on that. I don't. I find it just extremely slippery, whereas this one I don't find as slippery. I'm just giving you an opinion. The white one, and I forget what it's called, I'll look it up and I'll put a link in the description. I will also have the pattern in the description, and I'll let this one go for free. I think that if you do want some of my patterns, I'm thinking I might publish a book. So eventually, when I design enough of my own, they'll go into the book there. Because I'm a little bit of an oddball. I pick odd pattern shapes and, yeah, come up with different sizes. So that's in there. So I've got mine pre-cut, and I'm just going to go and cut everything out. The pattern we're doing, the pieces are going to be finished at 1/2 inch. So generally I like to give myself a good 1/4 inch other side, so that means I should be cutting it at 1 inch minimum. I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to cut everything at 1 inch and 1/4, and that's going to give me, just in case I go a little bit askew or a little bit wonky, it's going to give me that little extra that I'm going to work, that'll just make it easier to work with in case there's a mistake. So remember, paper piecing, and now that I look at it, I don't have the numbers on here, but I will add the numbers before I put the pattern up. You always start in the center. So we're going to start in the center, and we're going to work our way out. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start cutting. Yeah, there's my ruler now that I'm looking for it, not looking for it. I'm just going to cut at the 1 1/4 inch, and if it's too big, I'm going to trim down as I go. But I've decided I'm going to do, like the pattern says, I'm going to do the light yellows on one side and the stronger, darker yellows, the brighter yellows on another side. And I'm just going to trim down as I need and go on and work on from there. But I'm going to make sure I have extra of everything. Gone, and I've added the numbers. Another thing I want to mention is that they are mirror images of one another. They're not the exact same pattern, because when you go to put your little guy together, mine is wonky. He's got the up and down here and then over here, because I just did the same pattern. So I went to put them together. They don't match. So on this pattern, they match. You saw me throwing these guys away. These are my salvages. I'm just saving up salvages. One day I'm going to do a salvage blanket quilt, or if I decide I'm running out of time, I just might give them to somebody else who wants to do it. So I've set it up so that you can see me pressing and you can see me cutting. Afraid you're not going to be able to see me sew, because I think we all know how to sew, and you don't need to, nothing special for sewing this time round. It's still our 1/4 inch all around. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to sort these into my brights and my not brights. Or my softer yellows. So there's 15 pieces in all. So I know I have more than enough. And as I was saying, we start in the center. And you're starting with paper piecing, I find, is always, always, always the most difficult. Because they tend to slip and slide until once you've got it established. One of the things you need to do for paper piecing is lowering your stitch length. That just helps you tear the paper as you go. Another thing you need to do is, it's completely gotten off my mind, is pins. I do pin mine, and I'm going to need my scissors to cut. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get started. We're going to start always with our lightest ones in the center. At least that's how I do it. I start with my lightest of my darks and the lightest of my lights in the center, and I just chain sew. So, you know, sew this piece, then I'll put this piece in the machine while I press and trim this one. And then I'll just keep going. So this is going to be a long process, but don't worry, I will speed you up. So what you see me doing here is I am lining it up to make sure that I hit all my points. So I'm doing it from my perspective. So I got the light behind the camera, so this is where I want to line it up. And so I look like this, and you know what? Sorry, I'm going to take you down. Sorry for the wonky. So you can see how that shadows through. So I've got my first piece, which is that really tiny 1/2-inch square of the light red, but it's really light yellow. But there we go. Just so you see what I'm doing there. This time I'll shut you off. When I go to pin, I don't want to pin up and down, because straight up and down, I kind of do it at my angle there. Because if I go straight up and down, I will create a fold there in my fabric. So once again, I just banged it. Oh, that's what the other thing was. I want to make sure you mention that when you're doing this, you're doing the right side of your fabric out. So you're pinning right side up right now for your first one. And then everybody else, you're going to sew with your fabric right side down. And what you're actually going to sew is the mirror image, because when you flip it over, it's going to be the mirror image. So I've got my right side up. Now I'm going to my next color, which is this one. And I will use my little rotary cutter this time around. And I'm going to place that one with the right side together. And I'm once again lining it up so that it matches. This is the seam here that I'm going to sew. This one right here. Oh, and so I've done them right sides together. And I'm going to put a pin in this as well, because this is the one it's really, really shifty. And I want to make sure I don't want to pin it on the line that I'm sewing. It'd actually probably be better if I did it this way. And I'll just take it out as I sew. And as we sew, we want to start before our seam allowance, and we want to finish after our seam allowance. I generally do about 3 or 4 stitches before and about 3 or 4 stitches after. They're smaller, so they hold much, much better. And like I said, pinning, okay, so 15 years. He's 15 years old. And he has not come apart in which way ever, like whatsoever. So he's good to go. So I just trim my threads up. They don't have to be perfect because this is the inside. Pull out my pin. And I'm going to press open now. Remember, we set our seam. And then we press open. Okay, so then our next one is a light, and then we just tear back to the seam. It's a little more, but that's okay. It just makes it easier. And I need to find my other ruler now. This is my add a quarter ruler. I actually really like it because it's got a really fine edge here, and then it's got a wider edge here that is exactly 1/4 inch. So how you use this tool, and I paper piece a lot, so I use it a lot. So you get to fold back on the line like so, and then as you go to trim, it gives you the perfect 1/4 inch, and it butts up against where you want to cut. So if you were doing this with a normal rotary cutter, I find a lot of slippage, but because it's got that lip there, it just prevents the slippage and you get a more accurate 1/4 inch. So now I know the next one is for a light. And I'm noticing I've got the salvage in here, so I'm going to need to cut another piece. So excuse me. Now we need to move on to the beak and the tail and the eye and putting it together. Continuation from yesterday, because it's morning now, and I was sewing my little canaries here at night. So when I said they were mirror image, this is what I meant. They are the mirror images of one another. So our beak will go here, our tuft will go here, and we are going to sew this side, and this side together. And then this is the side we're going to fold in half to make our butt. So our tail's going to go right here. So I used just actually normal felt that you get at the dollar store, craft store to do this. But because I'm neurotic and I like trying new things, I thought I'm going to use some wool. So here is some hand-dyed wool that I had done before. And I had hand-dyed this, and then I had hand-dyed just some plain stuff. And I liked just the solid yellow. I thought the black in there, or the gray, I can't remember what it originally was just a bit too much. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to felt it. Now, embarrassingly enough, I have, well, I know 4 different ways that you can felt it. I've tried 3. One I found very frustrating in the beginning. The second one I tried with this, and as you can see, just hand felting with this. But you can see I've got green paint and even the green fibers from the leaves I had done before. And it's really difficult to get all your fibers out. So sometimes when you're felting, those fibers get in there and stay. But I do belong to a weaving group, or I did, and the weaving group, one of the ladies, she just has a whole big piece of wool. And so this morning I've gone apart and I've taken apart my daughter's Uggs that she doesn't wear anymore because they're made with real wool. Thrilled with how that process went. Beautifully, just goes beautifully. So I've already done that. You can see I'm pulling, I've got a well felted piece of wool in there. That would work great for his beak and his tuft. And then I thought, okay, you know, maybe it's just me being neurotic. This is dry felting, by the way. You can do it with wet, and maybe we'll do that, but not today. We'll go over that. But I did buy the Bernina needle punch accessory kit, and that was a whole wackadoodle load of money. A little bit frustrated. Went to play the video that comes along with it, and there's something wrong with the DVD. I can't actually watch. Well, I can watch, but the screen keeps shifting, so I can't see what they're doing. I can hear what the lady is saying, but I can't see what she's doing. So then I YouTubed it, and there were 2 lovely ladies showing what you can do with it. And they were showing some really beautiful pieces of work, but the very frustrating thing about that one was they weren't showing how. They showed you what you could do with it and all this beautiful work, but they didn't show you how. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a try. So I put her in, changed my throat plates because I needed buy a new throat plate to specifically fit this piece in, and promptly broke a needle. Now, I don't know why I broke the needle, if that was because I was moving it, because this is like free motion quilting. You take out your needle, you take out actually most of your bobbin casing, and you just drive. I call it driving. So I'm going to take the camera off and I'm going to shift you around so that you can actually see me felting with the automatic felter. I'm sure you can see I have just a little bit of flannel underneath to catch it because that's what they recommend. And you just drive. I'm driving slow-ish, and I'm just going and felting away. Now, what this does is those needles have barbs, and those barbs are just solidly pushing into the wool and the cotton underneath as I quilt. And as you can see, it comes out the other end. Not quite as nice. Sorry if you were pretty zoomed in there. So there you go. You can see all the barbs in my fabric. It does ruin. Yes, this is more for art pieces. So, you know, you want that? I'm not sure. I'm learning as you guys are watching. So it does kind of create a nice effect. I'm not sure if that's what I'm not going to use that. I'm really, really pleased with my little hand felted piece here. It's nice. It's thick. As you can see, it's about 1/4 of an inch. I will definitely have to talk to the lady there at the store where I got my Bernina about how this works. I do know I have used my hand felting tool that I've just lost here to hand felt some wool into the pieces. It actually, I think, does a nicer job. Let me try. But the advantage of the machine one is, yeah, you can see it's not quite as brutal, but it's pretty close to being brutal on your fabric too. To felt it through. Like, this isn't going to come out unless you really, really pull hard. And that's what you want when you're felting something on. You don't want it to come off in the wash, either if it's by hand or by machine. I, as a person, tend to not wash my stuff by hand. I tend to wash it by machine. There's very few that I will wash by hand. So I think this would be good enough for your machine, to go in your machine and not lose, you know, come off. Maybe we'll experiment with that later. Yeah, so I'll have to think more about that, but I wanted you to see what it was like. I have decided to go with my hand felted stuff. I'm really pleased with it. I like the color. I think the color goes beautifully with, you know, my little, I don't know, don't know if I'm going to call him a goldfinch or a canary. Not too sure. Maybe a canary, because that's originally what he was supposed to be. So I'm sorry if the felting stuff seemed really, really quick. Maybe I'll do a video on that later. Felting is very complicated. It's a whole nother layer and dimension to just add to it. Not necessarily something you have to do. If you want, just go ahead and use the regular, literally, dollar store felt. Mine looks a little worse for wear. Because I'm sure we've discussed I have a jerk of a cat. He chews stuff. He also pulls out pins and throws them on the floor. Yes, pins from here. He's not normal. He's loved and lovable. Sorry for my face. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut what I think looks like a beak shape, which is really just a very simple triangle. You want to cut it larger than what you think you're going to need it, because you are going to sew it in. Right? So there's my little beaky beak. I'm not too pleased with that. I think it looks too, I don't know. I'm just going to felt him up some more. Because, you know, why not? The bad thing about doing it by hand is it takes a while. The good thing is, yeah, keep your fingers out, because those are needles, and when you punch yourself, it hurts. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to pin him there, because we want to make sure we hit our seam. Well, I should probably trim that down too. So there's our little beak, and we want our tuft. thinking how I want our tuft to look. Okay. So there. Yep. I'm going to felt it some more. Just to take the rawness out, like the straight edge clips. And of course, yes, I go and I clip myself. Well, there we go. So I'm going to trim it down and pin it in place and show you. So we're going to sew from A to B. A to B. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. So I have to move it because the camera stand is on my cutting mat. Sorry. I'm wrong. We want them to pop out. Boy, I'm glad I caught that. You place them inside. I think I did that last time too, but I caught it this time to sew it correctly. Every once in a while, brain power works for you instead of against you. I'm glad it's 4 today. That felting was stressful enough. Okay, just stay stitched in place. Now let's do our little guys. Remember, we want them to be symmetrical. Let's trim those threads though. I've got the little piece of needle there that I broke off. Of course, attached to my scissors because they're magnetized. Trim off all our excess threads. Right, we're going to line them up. This is how I do it. I just do my, I guess they don't have to be perfect this time around. They just need to be pinned. I'm so used to accurate piecing and matching up there, but we don't need to do that today. All right. I'm going to do that reverse and then forward thing. Want a little more stabilized there. We don't want it to easily come undone because remember, we're going to flip it. So we're just going to do it the different way today. So that way when we go to sew our tails on and everything, we are not, Hazel, pulling apart our stitches. Oh, I've only got two of them put together. It is a bit nitpicky, and messy, just so you know. I always find it easier to bend back like so. So I realized I should have sewn this one instead of that one. So I'm going to undo that and sew that because I want my bird to look like a bird. So this is what I've chosen for my tail. Fabric A or B and A. That's going to be my large tail. I'm adding this just because I do want a copy of what my tail's going to be like. And I'm just going to quickly pin that on. And I'm actually going to make my tail bigger, just to experiment, see if I like that. I'm quickly going to give it a cut. This is the hard part. There we go, there's our tail. I'm just going to put these guys together first, because I don't really want them moving when I go to put them on. See, Cotter to know. So I'm just opening up the belly here because I shouldn't have sewn it all at once. Remember, I'm learning this as I go, or remembering this as I go. You get to benefit from all my mistakes. Once again, I'm doing the back and forth stitching. I find it works best. Okay, let's open it up. There we go. We're looking pretty good. Here we go. We just need to find eyes. Sew those on. First thing, putting on the eyes, make sure the needle you're using goes through your beads. Half an hour later, I found an appropriate size of black bead. Not as large, they're smaller, so he's gonna have really small beady eyes. But it will be what it will be. I like to double up my threads. Their eyes don't take a lot of abuse, but I haven't ever done it with single, so, and I'm using black, of course, to match the eye, which is gonna look lovely in the yellow there. But here we go. Let's decide where our eyes are gonna go. thinking right dab in the middle there. Yep, looks good. So I'm just going to continue with a few rounds through the needle there, or through the, pardon me, bead. Okay. There we go. Tie our knot. I still do a double knot. And then I go for a third. I don't want my tails too long because I don't want it shadowing through. All right, our eyes are in. And I keep that for sewing up the bottom. Now for stuffing. I've got some lovely little wool right here. Let's stuff them with wool for his McFloofiness. Let's just break it up. Okay, and we want to make sure we get it really well in those corners, so I always start with the corners. Kind of want them a little bit fat, but you don't want them too fat. So you kind of just, you go till you're happy. I'm pretty happy with that. Next part is I always add like beans or rice for weight. I just pop a bit of this in for weight. And I don't care where it goes, I just care that it goes in. With the wool, it's a little harder. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's just different with the wool. The wool, when you use the normal fiber fill tends to separate, so it can go all over and together with those. I don't think so much with the wool, but we really just want it on the bottom for weight. And I don't know how or when I learned this, but I prefer it this way. You tend not to lose them quite as often. I go in, I sneak in behind, and that's where I start my stitching. And he's lost some stuffing. He fell over because of the anesthetics there, right? He's having surgery, needs anesthetics. I'm just going to stuff him with what fell out. All right. And I do the whip stitch. Just nice and easy and quick. And yes, my stitches show a bit, but he's sitting on them. So I don't mind as much. And there we go. Oops. So there we go. I have a new one to add to the collection. I think he looks good, and I do like these tails better than the triangle ones.